There used to be a bit of taboo around prenups, right? I saw a quote that said to actually admit you had a prenup was to admit that you didn't really believe in love.
Some people I spoke to said it almost feels like testing fate because you're planning ahead for something that you don't want to happen. But that is changing, and I think there's a variety of factors involved in that.
For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. Let's just make sure we get the prenup first. The stats show Gen Z are choosing to have prenups these days, and that's a legal agreement that's made before a couple marry or enter a civil partnership, and the idea is a plan is made for how wealth is divided if a couple were to ever separate or divorce.
I think Gen Z is reframing prenups less as a sign of mistrust and more as a form of financial planning.
The idea of a prenup forces you to talk about money matters, which is extremely important in today's time.
For some couples, it's a deal breaker. It's seen as a smart financial move. And it's never been easier, too. There are now apps for you to be able to arrange your prenups. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the rise of the prenup, why some couples are choosing to have them, and what it tells us about the modern marriage, too. I'm Ikra. This is What's in the World from the BBC World Service. Okay, so let's get into it now with Basma Al-Atti, who is our BBC reporter in Nairobi. Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Yes, I'm good. And I've got Chelsea from the What in the World team right here with me in the studio. Hey, Chelsea.
Hey, Ikra.
Both of you guys. Chelsea, I'm going to start with you. A prenup. When I say that, and maybe I'm thinking about getting it, what does that mean? What does it look like in practice?
So it's basically an agreement that a couple signs before they get married, deciding how their assets, so that's the valuable things that they own, or their wealth will be divided in the event of a divorce. So not particularly the most romantic thing to be thinking about when you're planning your wedding, but you can use it for lots of different things. So when you think of the most valuable thing you own, a lot of the time the most main one is the house. So you can use your prenup to decide how that's divided between the two of you if you get divorced, or who gets to live in it after you, if you split up. You usually hear about them in relation to big celebrity weddings because, let's face it, celebrities tend to be more wealthy than the average person. However, they are becoming more widespread and there's growing awareness of them. There's been an increase in prenups around the world in general, especially in the US. So a poll that was recently done by Axios, that's a media company over there, found that in 2023, just over 20%, 21% actually, of Americans signed a prenup. And they compared that to just around 10 years before, so in 2010, and only 3% of couples had signed a prenup. But it's important to know that they're not legally binding everywhere. So in countries like the US, they've been around for quite a while, and if you sign one, it's more likely that a judge will use it in the event of you divorcing. However, in other countries like, say, India or Malaysia, and even here in the UK, they're not yet legally binding. So you can sign one, but if you do divorce, there's no saying that the judge will actually follow through everything you put in your prenup.
Interesting. Basma, I want to throw this open to you as well. Are we seeing this where you are too?
I mean, in the African continent, it's hard to find, usually it's hard to find data about any case, but for prenups, I think it's the same case. We don't have any like exact factual numbers, but I think one way to measure it is when you go through Instagram and TikTok and you find how many ads and how many people are speaking about getting prenups. Also, you find a lot of lawyers TikToks just being like, oh, we have a deal on this prenup, we're giving you we're having like a sale, like come in and sign a prenup, and they're talking about the benefits of it and all of that. And I think also why it's hard to measure it in Africa, because the laws I think are quite different, and prenups I think look differently in each African country, especially that a lot of countries, their laws are still very much inspired by the religion. I mean, in Morocco, it's not really a prenup, so you sign like a pre-marriage agreement, you add it to your marriage certificate, and most women would be like, I want to finish my PhD, or like, I want to keep working, just in case when it gets into the marriage, the husband would start like making conditions or trying to stop her from that. What I noticed is that most women's families are quite supportive for them to put such conditions because they're like, oh, you got to protect yourself. But when men do it, it's like a little bit more questionable, especially when in family. They're like, oh, why is he already being suspicious of you? At least this is a little bit of the culture in North Africa.
And Chelsea, I want to bring you back in now because there used to be a bit of taboo around prenups, right? I saw a quote that said to actually admit you had a prenup was to admit that you didn't really believe in love. It feels like we're facing a different conversation now.
Yeah, and that taboo is understandable, right? It's, like I said before, it's not particularly romantic to be thinking about what could happen in your divorce when you're getting married. But also, some people I spoke to said it almost feels like testing fate because you're planning ahead for something that you don't want to happen. But that is changing, and I think there's a variety of factors involved in that. So one of the main ones is that across the world, we're seeing that people are getting married later in life. So if you look at the Caribbean, so countries like Jamaica, Barbados, but also in Europe, so in Hungary and France, we're seeing that people are getting married more in their early 30s compared to, if you think about previous generations, people tended to get married more in their 20s, late 20s. And that means when you're getting married later in life, you're more likely to be established in your career, you're more likely to be earning more, and therefore you might feel like there's more at stake, there's more to lose if you do get divorced. And so it's encouraging those conversations. Another reason for this is the fact that maybe attitudes about divorce are changing. So divorce used to be extremely taboo and quite stigmatized, and it still is in quite a lot of countries. In countries like the Philippines, for example, it's actually illegal. However, in lots of other countries, it's becoming more common, especially in Europe and the US. And then finally, attitudes about marriage more generally are changing, especially for women. So there's more focus on women kind of self-actualizing, focusing on their careers and doing well in that, and then moving on to marriage. And for men as well, actually, there's more of a focus on kind of developing yourself and then seeing marriage as a capstone rather than the moment where you become a fully grown adult and you have a family to look after.
So I wondered, Basma, is the view of the prenup changing in Africa too?
It is changing slowly, but I won't say it's completely acceptable for most families. It's definitely a hard and a difficult conversation, especially for when families are aware of it. Like they're like, why are you making your partner sign a prenup? This is path for failure. I think especially in the Islamic culture, and I will take Morocco as an example, people would be like, oh, God would not bless your marriage because you're starting already like counting and making all these decisions based on money and based on a potential divorce. Like, why are you manifesting that for your life? But I think people who are quite young, Gen Z or millennials, they're thinking more pragmatically because, I mean, I love you, but I don't want your bad credit score. Like, if something bad happened, I'm gonna inherit your debt. I'm gonna have to pay for it. That would affect my finances. And also, I think now people wait for their careers to build up before like going into marriage. So they already build a lot in their personal life. They probably have already a property, no matter how much small or big it is. For them, it's still worth a prenup and it's still worth protecting it.
Okay, well, we got an idea from Basma there, Chelsea, that prenups aren't necessarily common or popular everywhere, but we are talking about them a lot at the moment. So what does that tell us about the modern marriage, do you think?
Well, I guess if you wanted to be cynical, you could say that marriage hasn't changed that much. I guess people could look at these stats and say marriage is taking on this financial focus and everyone's being pragmatic. Where's the romance? But for a lot of history, marriage has been a marriage transaction. So if you think of dowries, for example, husband or prospective husband used to pay money to the family of his prospective wife or give them cattle or something in exchange for the wife. So if you wanted to be cynical, you could say it's not really changing that much. But I think if you wanted to be a bit more romantic about it, you could say, I guess that this reflects that Gen Z and younger generations are more open to having those conversations about finance, because while money isn't the be-all and end-all in a relationship, if you are committing to being with someone for the rest of your life, you are going to have awkward and sometimes difficult conversations about things, and money is unfortunately going to be one of them. So it makes sense to start that early and see how it goes.
Start the marriage test early.
Exactly. See if you're compatible, because you're in it for the long haul. So it shows that people are planning more. And I guess in some ways that is romantic, to be open with the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with.
I think because now relationships, and especially Gen Zs, they love their therapy speech. Because I feel like before that, our parents, it was more of like an agreement between like two families, at least like I'm speaking about North Africa and the African continent overall. Like marriages was for our parents and grandparents more traditional. So it didn't really have a say. You didn't even knew your partner that much before getting married to them. But now, like after dating for quite a few years and taking the decision, I don't think Gen Z feels awkward about having that conversation. It's just like a decision that you have to make, because love is love, but then marriage is literally a legal paper. It's something legal. That doesn't mean that I don't love you. It just means that we got to put some rules before getting into it.
It's so interesting to hear about those different cultural views and how the pre-marriage process might be different depending on where you are in the world as well. Basma, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, Chelsea.
Thanks, Ikra.
Okay, and throwing it open to you guys now. Would you get a prenup? Why or why not? Make sure you comment below, like, and subscribe. I always love reading your comments, and I wanted to shout out Leah, who commented on our episode about China's military weight loss camps. And she said, some people are realizing obesity is unhealthy, but lack the willpower to lose weight on their own, so they attend these weight loss camps, which have their own reasons for existing. Everyone can judge whether it's suitable for them. If you feel there are risks, you don't have to participate. So thank you for that one. As always, thank you to all of you for commenting. For now, I'm Ikra. This is What's in the World from the BBC World Service. I'll see you next time. Bye.